Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your board game doctor today. And I am primarily a podcaster, but this is the first time that I'm doing a full blown video that I will be posting. Feel free to check out the podcast link in the show notes below, and vice versa if you are listening to this or hearing about this on the podcast. But I wanted to cover this game, Ibyron, a game by Scott and Anne Marie Nelson, that at the time of this recording is not published or widely available. This game is very much a worked upon prototype that I am recording a how to play video for Scott and Anne Marie because I do really enjoy this game, and there are videos online about how to play this game, especially from Rado, but those are a bit outdated since a lot of rules changes were made to this game since the first edition of it, which was about 10 years ago or so. So this is the most up-to-date version of the game, and we're gonna walk through a couple of turns of the game playing two-handed here. I've got the red player and the purple player here, and go through basically the rules of the game and how to take a couple of turns in this game. So the goal of this game, and I'm going to zoom in here on the red player, the goal of this game is to do one of two things, accomplish one of two things. You want to either remove all of these black squares from the taxing column. If you do so, as you can see here, you win. So if you are able to, through actions as we will talk about later in the game, if you are able to remove that cube, you win. Or if you are able to dismiss or colonize, or however you want to explain it, all of these workers that you started with at the beginning of the game. Once you assign basically them to enough buildings and you run out of workers to place, then you have triggered the end of the game as well, and if you're the first to do so, you win. Before we get into some gameplay, I would just want to show you a little bit about the setup of the game. So you have a bunch of these cubes lined up in these columns here. We'll get into why these are important. But here you can see that if you remove the last cube on the taxing column, you win. That's one victory condition. Here on your player board, you have the tracks that keep track of your resources, food, wood, etc. And we'll go into these as we go along in the game. Here I'm going to tilt the camera a little bit so you can see the stack. And so we have 16 workers that we start with. I got 4 piles of 4 there. And here on the side I have an extra 6 workers here. These are our overseers. We'll see them in a bit, and this is called the gold token for one of the buildings that you can build in this game. And these are the buildings that you can build. Most of them are described here in a physical means, but some of them aren't, and we'll get into that as well. Now, I'm going to jump over to the second player here. Based off of the setup, you start with a number of food, as well as either one of each wood and ore resource, or as you can see with the purple player, you can start with 2 of one resource. So I chose wood for the purple player here. And so the last, or second to last bit of planning or setup for this game, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, but you draw tiles from this stack of tiles. You can see that there are a little bit more than 30 total. You draw them until you have at least 2 tiles that are face up and match the number of players. In this case, this was originally set up for 3 players, but so this would be more accurate. And so you draw tiles and place them wherever you want, as long as they're flush with some of the other tiles that are already on the board, until you have 2 of these tiles face up that have the farm land or the bread symbol on them. And once you do, in reverse order, in the direction that you place tiles in, the players will choose one of these two farmlands to place their pond tile on, as well as this well, and as well as one of their farms from their supply. The pawn is kind of like your mayor and will dictate how and where you build buildings in the future. And the well designates where the mayor starts at the beginning of each round. This can be moved during the game, and you can think of it as kind of like your capital city. One last bit before we begin gameplay is you have these three uh, tokens that are, or these square components that are in this column. One is the garden, the foundry, and the bank. I'm going to switch over to this as an aid. This is the player aid created by the Nelsons. And so when you take off one of these cubes, you're building essentially an invisible building with a benefit, and you get to start with one of these benefits for free at the beginning of the game, but you can be able to build some of these buildings during the game. So the bank, if you remove that, you get 5 coins immediately before the start of the game. The garden, you get +1 food. And the foundry, you have 1 less ore needed for constructing any building. So in this example, I'm going to, for the villager, I'm going to remove the foundry. I'm going to put this cube right here so we know where it is, and we will use these cubes later. They are another resource that we can keep track of. And so with the foundry, this player will have one ore discount on each building that they construct later on. The red player is going to take the bank and automatically gain 5 money. So now we are ready to begin the game. So the first part of the game is called the wilderness phase. And we're going to start with the purple player here, since they have the starting player token here. This alternates at the end of each round. And each round, I would say, consists of both the wilderness phase followed by the village phase. So first of all, we gain horses, and we do so based off of the amount of empty spaces that we have here on this tech tree area of your player board. For every 4 empty spaces, you gain 1 horse. And as you can see here, by design, as we've removed one of these technologies from the far left column, as well as having all 3 of these be empty as well for each of these columns, we have 4 spaces empty, and so everyone basically starts with 1 horse. So with the wilderness phase, the actions that you can take are very well laid out here, and we're going to go over them real quick, and then I'll give you examples as we play throughout the game. So let's start with the purple player, and knowing that I have an ore discount from the foundry, I do need some ore to start building anyway, and so let's go ahead and set up an overseer with one of these tokens and start gathering some resources. So I take the work camp action, and I'm going to build an ore camp, or a mine. Now, the ore miner, so the section here in blue determines the overseer, quote unquote, buildings that you set up. They're basically resource gathering locations that you get to place. So what happens is you, let's say I do want to get or create an ore miner out of my overseer. I need to move onto a mountain tile, which is a tile that is signified with an ore, and I'll show you on the board. And it's here, it tells you how many discs you get to play out to create that camp. You can imagine this as these colonists are, you're taking 4 colonists out to mine this mountain to get ore. And then in the wilderness benefit here, this is the wilderness action section. When you do gather the resources, you get to take 1 ore per disc gathered. So let me show you how that's done. So I take one of my overseers, and I'll move it towards the main board here. And if you look at the main board, I, as the purple player, am 1 spot away from the ore location. And so if you imagine my overseer starting here in the capital city, I have to move him 1 space over. So this kind of goes over, and I'll place him here because I will move there. This goes over the movement section of the player aid here, where when choosing to pay for movement, you spend 2 workers to move either your mare or your player pawn or an overseer for over a distance of 1 hex. You can also pay for this with a single horse, but I will say that horses can be used to turn into buildings, and so you need to consider that with the horses if you need to use them to construct buildings versus if you're in a pinch and you don't have a lot of colonists, then you can use 1 horse to move over 1 hex. I have enough workers, so I'm going to use 1 or 2 colonists. And so what I do is I take 2 colonists, move them over to my village box, where they will be used in the village phase. And so that takes care of my movement of my overseer to that mountain spot. Now, since I'm setting up an ore mine, we know that we get to place 4 workers from our colonist supply to represent the 4 ore resources that we will mine. So I'm going to place them onto the location here. And that is my first turn. We have moved an overseer and set up an ore camp. The red player, with their first action, is going to be constructing a building. And so what the red player is going to do is move their player pawn, which is this, your main player. He's going to move that instead, and the red player is going to play it, move 1 section over here, and so I need to move 2 of my workers over to the village box as needed. And looking at the buildings that I can build, the red player is going to decide to build a runner's guild. So I am able to build any building that can be located on a flatland. And so that includes this runner's guild here, as well as if I have the resources to, I could build an explorer guild, or I could build, say, a silver mine as well, etc. So with that, I'm going to move over to my buildings here. I'm going to zoom in so you can see where the Runner's Guild is. So I'll take my Runner's Guild and play it there. So the Runner's Guild is an interesting building, and let's get into some of these building actions as well. So the wilderness benefit of playing the Runner's Guild is gain 1 hex tile and place it immediately when built. Let's see what I draw. So I draw this tile. It's probably the same tile that I had put out earlier. And just place it as such right there. That's fine. Okay. If I move back over in the villager phase, this one says you can move the home well, and we'll get into that very soon. So that is moving and constructing a building. Moving back to the player, or the purple player, they're going to take the gather action. So I'm going to gather 2 ore from that well, or from that mine that I established during the purple player's turn. So I take 2, I can take up to 2 of these workers off and move them directly to my village box, and for each worker that I've moved off, I gain 2 ore. There you go. With the red player's next move, I'm going to build a farm. The grain field, or how you get food, is it works a little bit differently, but the way that you build it is the same. And so going back over to my into the shared board here, since my well is here, I need to move an overseer 2 spots to get to this newly explored region with a farmland available here. So if I move them 2, so I'm going to remove workers to move 2 spots, and I realize that I have not given my red player the additional horse that it needed to start the game since they have 4 spots open. So I'm going to take my red overseer and put it on the land here, and I get to move 4 workers and stack them on that spot there. Perfect. The purple player's action will be simple. They will remove the last 2 workers from this overseer's spot and put it back into their village spot, gaining up to 4 ore. Now, after you do this, you do need to put your overseer and flip them onto their back, as demonstrated here. And this is important for reasons we will discuss. Now, with the red player's turn, normally you'd think you would be able to gather from the grain pile that we have here, the farm. However, the other difference about the fields or the farms that you build is that they can only be removed during the village phase. So we're going to leave that part alone for now. So instead, the red player is going to set up a lumber mill and with their last overseer. And so from the map, the red player's well is 1 space away from this lumber field, so they need to spend 2 workers to move them over, to move the overseer over to that spot. And then I get to place the last 4 workers to that spot there to gather from. And the purple player's turn is going to be pretty simple. They're just going to gather these 2 workers back to make 2 extra ore. And that's what the red player is going to do as well. They're going to gather. And so, as you can imagine, these are pretty quick turns sometimes that you're taking. So with these 2 workers back, they bring back some lumber. With a lot of these workers that the purple player has, they're going to build another building. And what they're going to build is a refinery. So if you look at the main board here, they need to build a refinery on one of these dark mountain spots. This spot that I put the overseer on is occupied by an overseer, even though there is no camp left. And so I couldn't build a building here or create another camp there yet until this worker or overseer is removed. So I have to move over 2 spaces, which I can do if I spend 4 of these workers. And I'm going to keep that horse because I need it to pay for the refinery. So you can see here the first one in this silver row, this gray row, the refinery. If you place a refinery on the mountain, you need to spend 4 ore and 1 horse, which I have here. So I'm going to spend those resources. And on the main board, I have to move... whoops, I grabbed the wrong player. So my purple pawn, I have to move over here. And I get to place out a refinery. So I've placed out the refinery here. Now, when I play the refinery, if you look at this here, this tells you how many discs are used up to do so. The refinery takes care of 1 disc, and so I take 1 disc from my colonist supply and I remove it from play. And so I am already 1 worker into getting my victory condition from this part, of the game completed. And back to the thing here. So when I play the refinery, I get to remove a tech cube from the refinery track. That is, once this is gone, the refinery track is right here. So I get to remove this cube and place it there. So moving on to the red player's turn, so they automatically have to move into the village phase, which we'll talk about now, since they don't have any colonists from the supply that they can use to build buildings or move overseers around. And so let us move into the village phase. In the village phase, the first action that we can do as the red player is listed here as the farmer. We get to harvest grain by removing one disc from a grain field, gaining 2 food when all but one disc is completely removed. So we can do that right now. As a part of the village phase, the first thing that I will do is move one of my workers from the farm and put it in the rest box here. So after you have used villagers from the village box to do actions on the shared board, they automatically move to the rest box. Back to the purple player, they are still technically considered to be a part of the village or the wilderness phase. And they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 workers remaining. And so right now the village, the purple player could potentially take another action, but instead they're going to forfeit. And when they forfeit, and I should have done this with the red player as well, but what they do is they move all of these workers that are left in the colonist supply over to the village box here. And I moved over 5 workers. And to represent that, I take my player pawn for the purple player and put it on the 5 spot here. I'm going to do the same for the red player here as well. Since they used all of their workers, it goes here on the 0 spot. And we'll show you why that is important in a second. One thing that I failed to do with the previous red player's turn is to remove or to place to use the farm action to remove that disc from the farm to the rest box. And so what I needed to do was place a red disc onto a farm like so. I realize this is backwards. So what you do is you place the first marker, worker disc that you place onto a location. You only have to pay 1 to use the action. And so moving back to this, if I get to place a worker on that action, I get to remove a disc from a field, which I did previously. So now we are up to speed with that. And I think I'm going to keep doing that because my my opponent here, the red player's opponent, has an available farm token available here to be used. And so if I go back to my village box, I will pay 1 worker here to use the farm to be able to move 1 more disc off of my field there and into the rest box. I need to remove 1 more before I get to move my food up twice. Now, if you noticed that the red player still has a couple of worker discs on the lumber field, that is fine to do. I simply forgot to gather these during the wilderness phase, but you're more than welcome to leave them on the board for harvesting later, so that is fine too. For the purple player's first movement or first action in the village phase, they're going to use that refinery that they had built previously, or that had been built previously. So they're going to play 1 marker since they're the first one to use the refinery. And to show you what the refinery does, on the village phase, you take 1 ore equal to the current technology level of the ore refinery. That is designated here in the refinery column. So for each refinery action, right now, I gain 1 ore. You can see if I built another refinery, I could get 2 ore per refinery action, or 3 if I remove those completely. The red player wants to remove one more worker from that field to be able to get some more food. However, if you notice, there aren't any more farm lands available that are free from workers. And so the way that you accomplish this is you look at how many discs are on top of the token that you want to use, and you pay the amount of workers that are already on there plus 1. So since there's already 1 disc on this farm spot, I need to pay 2 discs to play that action over again. So I'm going to do it on that farmland, if that makes sense. So I paid one of those workers to the rest box, the other one goes on top here. They all ultimately go to the rest box later, but for now, that just tells you and tells all the other opponents how many workers they would need to pay next to be able to use that spot again. But I'm going to remove that 3rd worker from the field, and that gives me 4 food. Up to 4 food now. I got plus 2 food from that, and that is nice. So the purple player is going to do something that you can also do, and it's kind of a wild action that you can take during the village phase. If you move 4 workers from your village box to the rest box, you can take any one of these village actions immediately. You do not have to place a worker onto an existing tile that has been built or building that has been built onto the board. What I want to do is use the harbor village action here, which is to remove 1 face down overseer from the hex to gain 1 horse. We do have 1 overseer here that happens to belong to the purple player. It does not matter if it belongs to you or another opponent, but in this case, I'm going to remove that overseer, play them back to the colonist supply here for later, and I gain 1 horse. So the red player is going to activate the other farm here, so they have to pay 2 workers. 1 automatically goes to the rest box, the other goes on top of this farm, to remove that last disc from the farm, or that flatland area, or sorry, the grain, or the farmland area, I guess, to build a farm. And the farm is right here. And I'm going to place it here next to this overseer, and this overseer is now flattened as well. If you noticed, here, I'll go back to the red player. You start the game with a certain amount of each of some of these buildings, right? You have 3 farms to begin with. 1 is already up there, so you can build up to 2 more farms. You only have 1 ranch, 3 trade houses, etc. And so, so that is a limitation. If you don't have a building to build, even if you have the resources, you can't build it. So the purple player is going to take that wild harbor action again. Now that the red player has an overseer that is flipped over, I'm going to move it back over to their supply for them in order to gain 1 horse. Now we're up to 2. The red player is going to take 1 disc from their supply, from their village box, and play it onto the Runner's Guild. And by doing so, I get to move my well to any other spot that has a building there. And I'm going to move it to this spot right here. And so when I begin the next round, the red player is going to have their player pawn start here. And so that tells you where you can start building, how far you would have to move in order to get to certain locations to build, as well as to move your overseer to start work camps to get resources. The player is going to do something interesting here, and once again we're going to use 4 tokens to take a random or a wild action, and they're going to take the Explorer Guild village action here, which is to take 2 isles plus 1 per Runner's Guild that are on the board already, and keep 1 of them to take an Explorer action immediately and place it. And here, let's see if we can draw what I'm hoping to get from the bag here. And I think we have, yes, that's perfect. We're going to take this tile and play it here. And I think this is going to be okay for now because what we want to accomplish soon is to start building tiles on top of other ones. And this is important for a couple of different buildings. I'm going to move back to the building chart here. As we have discussed before, there are such things as high mountains and high forests and high fields. That basically means, if we go back to the main board, let's say I were to draw this tile later on and place it. I could literally place it on top of these three empty tiles. The stipulation is that there aren't any wells or buildings or overseers or anything on top of those locations already. And so that's why I couldn't play the tile that I used currently with the purple player on top of any of these other tiles because they are occupied. But in the future, I would be able to place this here, thus creating a second tier. And so now this particular hex is considered a high mountain. This is a high forest. And the harbors, there aren't any, or the sea spots, they aren't really, or lakes or ponds, whatever you want to call them, they're not considered a high version, quote unquote. But so that is the purple player's turn. They decided to play that particular hex there, and we'll move to the red player. They only have 3 workers left from the village phase, and so they might take the runner's action themselves because they can, or the refinery action as well. That might be more beneficial to them since they want to get some resources. So there's only 1 purple worker on the refinery action. They pay 2 workers to take that. One of them goes on top to show that there's 2, the other one to the village box, or the rest box. And they only have 1 refinery benefit based off of this track, and so they gain 1 ore. The purple player only has 2 more villagers left, and so they can take the Runner's Guild action, which they will do. Once again, have to play 2 workers, and they can move their well to another position. And they're actually going to take the old location that the red player started with, since it's now vacant. You can only have 1 well per per tile, and the well always has to be near a building. And so this works out, and this is fine. And so they'll move that there. The point is that they're hoping to be a little bit closer to this tile to build upon, as that is playing into their strategy. The red player has no other actions that they can take, and so they're just going to once again kind of forfeit their village actions and just move that red worker disc to the rest box there. And the purple player is out as well, and so now we are ready to clean up. So the first thing that you do in the cleanup phase is that you move as many workers as you can back from the rest box to the colonist supply, so you can have colonists ready to take wilderness actions in the next round. So it was important to know where, if you forfeited during the wilderness phase, as we did with the purple player, we had 5 workers on the colonist supply that moved to the village phase. And so because of that, we can automatically move over 5 tokens. That is 4 plus 1 here to the colonist supply for being able to do so. Next, you take as many workers as you have based off of your food count, and so I get to move over 2 more workers for free based off of my food. Food does not go down, and you do not use food resources to move them over. It statically stays at that number to signify how many workers you can move back to the colonist supply after the village phase. If I wanted to move more workers back from my rest box to the colonist supply, I would need to spend 1 coin per worker moved over. With the red player, this is something that we can do. So you notice that the red player had no workers after they moved to the villager phase, so they do not move any colonists over that way. However, we do have 4 food, and so we get to move over 4 workers based off of the food count. And let's go ahead and spend 4 money to move over those last 4 workers. And so we have 8 to work with in the next round. And then we check to see if anyone has achieved the endgame condition where all but 3 workers are in buildings, or that last column of the taxation column here, if that was removed, then that would trigger the end. So that that's when you check to see if if the game has been complete. And I just want to mention that you can take additional actions at any time. So you can exchange 10 gold, or sorry, 10 money if you reach the top of this track. You can spend all that money to move up your resource of gold up 1. Gold is important to build some of these higher level buildings like the church and the tabernacle and the town hall, which allow you to gain a lot of money and move yourself closer to the end game. You can also exchange 2 black technology cubes for 1 reserve worker. So the purple player could do this. Technically, they have 2 black cubes here. They could spend them to gain 1 of these reserve workers and place them into their reserve. But that is not what they're going to do with their turn. But you can do those at any time, basically. So right now we're going to clean up. The overseer that is still standing with some workers in their camp will stay there. If there was an overseer that was laid down flat, they are taken back to the home board as well, if no one had taken the harbor action to move them. And we take all of our workers here that are left over, and we should have done this at the very end of the village phase, and move them back to the rest box as well before we move them over to our colonist supply. So I'm going to clean up real quick. So now the map is empty. All the workers have been replaced or removed back. And yeah, they should have gone to the rest box before we did the whole movement phase from the rest box to the colonist supply. But nothing really has changed because we've basically used all of the resources that we've had to do so. And so as you can see, we're starting the second round with a lot fewer colonists ready to take village spots, and so or to take wilderness actions with. And so things start to get tight really quick. And before we begin, we also move the first player token marker clockwise, and so the red player will go next. And for every 4 empty spots, just like we did with at the beginning of the first round, everyone gains a horse. Since everyone here, both players have 4 empty spots, not 8.